You've been letting someone slowly weaken your confidence for years. Not in loud, obvious ways, not through dramatic failures, but through small, repeated sentences that slip out in ordinary moments. Words that quietly settle into your identity. You hear their voice every single day, in conversations, after mistakes, in passing thoughts. And the thing is, you trust them. That someone is you. We underestimate how much influence our own words have over us. When someone else criticizes you, you pause, you analyze, you decide if it's valid. But when the words come from your own mouth, you accept them, not because they're proven, not because they're fair, not because they're absolute, but because they're familiar, repeated, and internalized. Napoleon Hill called this autosuggestion. Repeating ideas gradually reshapes belief. Even unconsciously, your mind listens to your own words long before you consciously take note. I used to think self-criticism meant self-awareness, that labeling my weaknesses meant I was facing reality, confronting my flaws instead of hiding from them. And to some degree, that's still true. Most people believe that. We think we're realistic, not sugarcoating things. But most people rarely stop to ask the question that matters most. Are you describing a temporary state or defining your permanent identity? And you might not realize how often that line gets crossed. I remember walking into conversations with friends, family, even strangers at the gym, and almost without thinking, when they asked, "How are you?" I would say, "I'm tired," because it felt like the only honest answer after a long week filled with stress, poor sleep, and constant busyness. We say things like that casually, and eventually it becomes filler, like a conversational crutch that hides the fact that words, repeated enough, shape more than just conversation. They shape energy, behavior, and perception. But my parents noticed. Last year, when I was visiting them, they said, "You always say you're tired." And I brushed it off because I had indeed been tired for a stretch due to stress, poor sleep, and eating poorly. But then I realized, even on days I wasn't exhausted, I still said it. And it had stopped being a description and it had become my identity. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it began to define how I moved, how I spoke, how I engaged with people. The thing is, most people don't realize how small, repeated phrases shape the energy around them. Every time I said, "I'm tired," the room suddenly shifted. The thing is, most people don't realize how small, repeated phrases shape the energy around them. Every time I said, "I'm tired," the room suddenly shifted. Energy dipped, and people responded to the tone. And I started feeling as tired as I claimed to be. It ended up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. We all know this phenomenon in some form. Maybe it's not tiredness, maybe it's self-doubt. Maybe it's that persistent little voice in your head that says, "I'm not good enough." These small, repeated words do compound. They echo in your mind, and they end up shaping how you show up in the world. You might not even say, "I'm tired," like me. Maybe you're telling yourself, "I'm bad at this." Or maybe it's, "I've always struggled with consistency." Maybe it's even, "That's just who I am." They sound small and almost harmless, but every tiny word you say aloud is a vote for the identity you are creating, shaping the life you are stepping into. James Clear calls this principle a vote. Every action, every habit, every choice is a vote for the person you want to become. And if every sentence and action and choice is a vote, what have you been voting for? See, I wasn't actively trying to sabotage myself, and I can assure you most people aren't. But the truth is, you hear your own voice more than anyone else's. And that voice, the one you allow to narrate your life, becomes the one you believe fastest. Because you trust yourself. You believe your own words. And that belief shapes the next action, the next day, the next chapter. You don't need extreme affirmations, and you don't need to convince yourself you're unstoppable. But maybe we need to stop finalizing temporary states. Because when we say, "I'm bad at this," our brain hears instruction. When we act in alignment with, "I'm learning this," our brain hears possibility. One closes the loop, the other keeps it open. And open loops hold attention in stories, in identity, and it presents change. I ended up realizing my narration was quietly shaping how I showed up in life, not in dramatic moments, but in micro adjustments that stacked over time until they felt permanent. I realized that identity isn't built in explosive explosions. It's built in repetition, in language, in actions, in votes. And that's why Napoleon Hill and James Clear pointed towards the same truth. Repeated words and actions sculpt who you become quietly, invisibly, but relentlessly. You've been building something with your words. We all have. And the good news is narration is adjustable. Behavior is adjustable. Sentence by sentence, action by action, thought by thought, using short, deliberate, intentional words. Because you're always listening and you're always becoming. Ask yourself this. If someone followed you around, repeating every sentence and observing every action, would you feel empowered or confined? Would you feel the freedom to grow, or would you feel the weight of all the small words and choices you've already made? You don't have to become someone new tomorrow. You don't need to erase yourself, but you can stop rehearsing the version of yourself you're trying to outgrow, and you can start speaking and acting like someone still in the process of becoming. Because you are, I am, whether we narrate it that way or not. Every word you speak, every small action you take, every habit you repeat, it's shaping you quietly and constantly, and it doesn't have to trap you or provide negative reinforcement for you. It can guide you, build you, and empower you, sentence by sentence, action by action, vote by vote. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize the quiet influence you had over yourself all along, that the voice you trusted the most was the one you were shaping intentionally, deliberately, and thoughtfully. That the person you are becoming has been forming in those small, repeated moments. And if you choose, you can continue shaping it consciously and every single day. And if this video inspired you, even a little, to start speaking to yourself with more positive intention, I'm really glad. Because I don't make these videos as someone who has it all figured out. I make them as someone who used to constantly criticize himself. Someone who thought being hard on himself meant he cared. Someone who didn't realize that every word he repeated internally was quietly shaping who he was becoming. And at some point, I made a decision to treat myself with more grace, with more awareness, and with positive reinforcement instead of ridicule. Because words, especially the ones you direct at yourself, are seeds. And depending on how you nurture them, they either grow into doubt or into identity. If that message resonates with you, you're exactly who I make these videos for. Like-minded people who are trying to grow, not perfectly, but intentionally. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you more than you know. This is Rardo, and I'll see you in the next video.